Bonjour à tous, bienvenue dans les conversations Franc-Tireur. Nous recevons aujourd'hui avec Michael Prazan Nathan Law, l'auteur de Freedom, How We Lose It and How We Fight Back. Il est de passage à Paris et il nous a fait l'honneur de venir nous parler de la démocratie, des droits de l'homme à Hong Kong et ailleurs également. C'est tout de suite. Hello, Nathan Law. You are in Paris for a few days and you have honored us with some time to talk about your books, about your life, about your struggle, your fight for democracy in Hong Kong. Your book is Freedom, How We Lose It and How We Fight Back. Where is the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong today?
For now, after the implementation of the national security law in 2020, it criminalized free speech and put a lot of political activists in jail. So we are facing enormous pressure after the massive demonstration we have had in 2019 and 2020. So for now, it's getting quiet, but they are also doing a lot of back-end work supporting political prisoners, trying to get together for less politically sensitive events, etc. So we are in a more quiet stage, but there are still people working on the scene and trying to do something to raise awareness for the democracy of Hong Kong.
Can you explain us again what exactly was the national security law and where did it come from and why was it so problematic for the population of Hong Kong?
The national security law was directly imposed by Beijing in June 2020. It was a law that criminalized free speech. There have been numerous arrests that even protesters, they marched down to the street peacefully, holding a sign or chanting a slogan, or even participate in a primary election, which every single political party in the West would do. They are all being arrested and thrown to jail. So the remarkable thing about this national security law is it criminalizes peaceful actions, and even though you have like political opinion that's different from the Chinese Communist Party, you will face possible persecution because of that.
Since 2014 and the imprisonment of pro-democracy activists, your companions, unrest has been building against the government's amendment allowing extradition to China, to mainland, of any fugitive. Why did this amendment set the world on fire?
In Hong Kong, we used to believe that the one country, two system is the kind of firewall that separates us from mainland China in terms of political system and legal system. So for now, we are still having two separate political and judicial system. But the extradition treaty makes us very nervous because it is logical to think that any request by Xi Jinping to extradite anyone in Hong Kong will not be denied by the Hong Kong government. They are the puppet of Beijing. They are not elected by the people. They are directly appointed by the Chinese Communist Party. So it means that China can get anyone through that firewall to trial in mainland China. And Hong Kong people felt like it was such a nightmarish news for them. They don't want to be trial in China. They want to be, if they violate a law, they want to be trial in Hong Kong because we have certain degree of judicial independence. But after that, we can see there the Chinese government's intervention is getting more and more, and a lot of characteristics that separate us from mainland China, that defines one country, two systems, have already gone.
About what one country, two systems, I was personally in 1998 in Hong Kong, just 1 year after the handover, and people, they believed it was possible. I mean, they trust China that they would, they would preserve their security, their democratic habits, their way of life. It didn't happen this way. Why? And, what happened and why did, China didn't respect its commitments?
I think many would regret that they had believed China at the first place, not only for Hong Kong people, but we've seen that narrative from some Western leaders in democratic countries. I think is for them is really important to be awakened for now. Beijing, they have no intention to be more liberalized. They have no intention to be more modernized. What they have done was amassing their economic gains and digital authoritarianism to consolidate their power and to crack down civil society, both in mainland China and in Hong Kong. We used to believe that one country, two systems. It was the notion proposed by the Chinese Communist Party saying that Hong Kong people, please don't get nervous. You will live your life after the handover, after you return the sovereignty back to mainland China. But what had happened is the two system does not protect us. It allows Beijing to deprive us from our freedom and democracy and autonomy.
What role did the internment camps in Xinjiang play in the pro-democracy protest?
And what is it exactly, actually, those camps?
We've seen footages and we've seen researches about in the Xinjiang region there are more than a million, or even some figures showing 3 million Uyghurs being locked in the so-called re-education camp. But from our external world, it is a concentration camp that the people there, they cannot live their life by their choice. They are being forced to forget their mother language, to stop from practicing their religion. And instead, they have to sing songs glorifying the Chinese Communist Party and to say that their religion is bad, etc. We have seen evidence like this that make us believe the Chinese Communist Party is actively erasing a culture and a people there so that they lose all their uniqueness. And I think this is really terrible because for now, in our modern world, we will talk about diversity. We'll talk about respect for minority. We talk about respect for religious practices. But these things are gone. The Chinese Communist Party is extremely brutal in this area.
Regarding, the situation with the COVID-19, what do you think about the way China handled the whole, pandemic? What was the purpose of, of this restriction, very tough of liberties? And do you think that someday we will know something about how it was created, how it, escaped from a laboratory, or it was just a natural phenomenon or whatever? What do you think about it?
For now, China still sticks to the COVID-0 policy, and it creates a lot of discontent and inconvenience and disruption to the economy in places like Shanghai and many other big cities. Many believe that it is because Xi Jinping's personal politically driven ambition. He coined the term zero COVID. He wants China to continue to use it, but it's out of the touch of reality. We're not going to live in a society like this. So it's quite clear that from the way that China is handling COVID, especially under Xi Jinping's leadership, it shows Xi Jinping is that there are no one he would listen to. His personal ambition, political motive surpass the needs of people, surpass or even the needs for economy. And I think it's the weakness of dictators that they listen to no one else. They only believe in themselves. It will lead them to make mistakes.
And what about the origin of the pandemic? Do you think the Chinese government lied to the population, to the whole world, about the context of its creation, or what?
It's obvious that China has been disrupting the investigation of the origin of COVID. Many reports show that the theory of a leak should not be excluded. I'm not saying that it must be the case, but I think if they want to understand how the pandemic has started in order to prevent the next one, or in order to better cope with the current ones, they should be more open for investigation. Maybe a very impartial result can prove them innocent. Maybe that's what they want, but at least they must be more open to investigation. Otherwise, the kind of accusation will continue to roll, and people would tend to believe more that you have created all this mess to the world.
And do you think that this atmosphere of hiding the truth, the fact that they lock up the whole country during such a long time, could lead to some kind of a protest of the people? I mean, the Chinese people, not only the people from Hong Kong. Would it be a threat to the power, maybe?
For now, we've seen there have been some sporadic or random protests from people because they were fed up with no food, no no activities, being locked in at home, etc. But we have not seen a very organized protest with a clear political demands. And I don't think it will happen in China shortly because of how suppressive the China system is. But it's like a pot that there are growing pressure, and one day it may blow up the lid. We don't know about that and when it will come. But if the Chinese government is unable to channel those pressure out, as we've seen, there will probably be a big crisis for them.
About those years of protests for democracy, after those years of repression by the Beijing power, is this independent movement, because there was a part in the protest that claimed for the independence, is still alive today? And what's the future of those protests, on your opinion?
Most of the Hong Kong people want Beijing to keep their promises made to Hong Kong people 4 decades ago, that we will preserve our democracy, autonomy and freedom after 1997. But what had happened is they never kept their word. They violated the international treaty that they signed with the British government, and they take away our freedom and to make Hong Kong into an authoritarian police state. So I believe that most of Hong Kong people, they wanted those promises back. And it is a very humble request. We are just asking Beijing to do whatever they have promised. We're not asking something that has never happened, there is no sign of it. So I think this will still be the path that we are pursuing and trying to make the world recognize that there is a responsibility Beijing should bear, and we deserve our democracy and freedom.
And you think you will win at the end?
It's difficult to predict the future. We don't have a crystal ball. But what we have seen is the 2019 protests in Hong Kong have changed the world massively. We've seen a lot of change of attitude towards the Chinese government, from thinking that, they are a good partner, to, for now, a competitor or a systematic rival, a regime that is actively promoting totalitarianism around the world that discredits our cherished democracy. So I think Hong Kong has changed the world so much, and I think it is possible that we will amass enough momentum for change, and we can get our democracy. It may be long, like what Martin Luther King said, the arc of moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, and that's what I'm hoping for.
On that matter, do you think that the international community sustain you enough, or do you think that people from Hong Kong are left alone?
Of course, sometimes we feel alone. The policies towards China has not been as assertive and as tough as we imagined, especially in the case of Europe. But for us, our mission is we try to make changes. We try to engage. We try to make them to understand that the threat of the Chinese Communist Party is not only to the Uyghurs, it's not only to the Hong Kong people, but to the world. We've seen member states in the European Union that they get corrupted, that the democracies roll back by the temptation of becoming a dictator under the protection of the Chinese government. And we've seen the Chinese government using economic might to blackmail countries like Norway, like Australia, like Lithuania, that they force them to step away from voicing out for human rights. We've seen cases like this, and it's very clear that it is a threat to our democracy, and they are so confident over their totalitarianism. So I do believe that there is a long way we needed to go to implement suitable policy to address the point that we are here to defend democracy, and China is not going to make us back down.
Do you understand and share the concerns of the Taiwanese who fear an invasion of Taiwan and an annexation of the country?
After Putin launched an unprovoked war on Ukraine, we've seen how unpredictable dictators are and how their personal ambition can override all those considerations and destroy peace and make lives lost. We are, of course, concerned whether this would repeat in Taiwan, which Xi Jinping, because he has an ambition of literally annexing Taiwan in real terms to destroy peace. Yes, we're concerned, and that's why I hope the world, for now, they can actively support Taiwan. They are actively to impose deterrence. It is not to provoke, it's to stop war. It's to tell Beijing that your military action in Taiwan is not welcomed by the international community, and you will be sanctioned, will be isolated, will use a lot of effort if you dare to destroy the peace there. And I think the world is now still need a lot of effort, especially from member states in the European Union, that we need a tougher stance. We need to be more supportive. We need to introduce Taiwan to more international organizations so that they get the recognition they deserve.
People of Taiwan, they believe themselves to be Chinese, but they're not China anymore. Do you have the same kind of identity in Hong Kong, actually?
Taiwan people think that they're Taiwanese. Hong Kong people think that our Hong Konger. I think it is not about whether we believe we are an independent country. It's about we lived in a separate history. We live in a separate culture. Hong Kong and China, mainland China, we speak different language. We've been through different period of history. We've been through the British colonial time, even though it was nothing to be praised of. But that was literally, we have walked different paths in history, and it creates Hong Kong that is so modernized and a part of the Western world lived in Hong Kong. So we have different experience, different way of life, different values. So we have a strong identity, and that's what Beijing wanted to destroy. They don't want this uniqueness of different people in different places in China to exist, because they are very dominant. They have that imperial thinking that everyone should bow down to the Chinese Communist Party. And this is the crackdowns, one of the reasons why the crackdowns are happening in Hong Kong.
Going back to the protest of those last years, people who has been arrested, I mean, your comrades, what happened to them? Did they have the same fate that people that has been arrested after Tiananmen in 1989? And a lot of them disappeared, actually. What happened to your friends?
Most of my friends who are active in politics in Hong Kong are in jail or have already served jail sentencing. My dearest colleague, Joshua Wong, who have been fighting for democracy on the street together for many, many years, he's now in jail for more than a year and a half. We still don't know when he can get out, because a proper trial has not yet started. He's been denied bail. The same case applies to Jimmy Lai, a media Mongol, who was the owner of the Apple Daily News, which was the only pro-democracy newspaper, but it was shut down by Chinese Communist Party because it was critical. He is a 70-year-old man, and people predict that he may not be able to get out of prison alive because of how draconian the national security law is. So it is very dreadful, the political prisoner situation in Hong Kong, and I think all of us should have a voice in trying to say that prosecuting these people because of their political, peaceful advocacy is not acceptable. The French government should speak out. The other governments should speak out. We don't know whether it works at the end of the day, but more attention means more exposure, high probability for the Chinese government to feel bad, and they may release them earlier.
What about the condition of treatment in jail?
The condition of treatment in jail is also dire. They treat you as a commodity. You have your number there, you don't have a name. They treat you as a dehumanized object. Some of the political prisoners I've heard, they have spent a long time in solitary confinement, that in a whole day they don't see anyone, or they have only very limited time to walk out their very small cell. Some of them with lower profile, they're even being physically abused. So I would say that it is not as bad as the torture in mainland China, because we all know that mainland China's torture is beyond limit. But we can also see that there are terrible things happening in Hong Kong's prison.
Yourself, you've been arrested actually after the umbrella protests, and you've been also in jail. How long did you stay there? How was your condition there?
I was very fortunate. I was spending a few months in jail compared to the sentencing now that we're seeing. We're talking about years. So I was already very fortunate. When I was there, the only things that I can say to a prison guard was, yes, sir, sorry, sir, and thank you, sir. There's no way I can say no or raise my eyebrows or raise my opinion to them. They were there. These rules were set to blunt your critical thinking, to make you to become submissive. And as an activist, my major role was to think how I can navigate all those efforts and still be critical, be independent-minded. So that was a period of time. It was difficult, but I think the condition now, because I served jail in 2017, the condition now, I think, is getting worse.
What is your opinion about Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong?
Carrie Lam was, of course, a very self-righteous person. He believed in power. He pushed the extradition treaty without really having consultation with the society. And he was, of course, a puppet of China that he carried out any orders that Xi Jinping gave her. So we would say that we never elected her. She has not been fit for becoming the leader of the city. Her popular rating has been extremely low. So this is a tragedy that we've seen people like her running the city. When
you were elected as a legislator in 2016, you refused to take the oath of office and used that as a political platform. This will lead to your impeachment, and do you regret that today?
What had happened in the oath controversy shows how Beijing can manipulate the legal system in Hong Kong to persecute activists like us. When I was elected, I had to swear an oath. And for me, I did what the law requires back then. I've consulted my legal opinion, and actually, the president of the Legislative Council approved my oath. So in the oath, I quoted Gandhi. I said that I will serve the people instead of the regime, etc. It's very common, and it was allowed. But what had happened is, when I was serving the council, when I passed the oath test, the Beijing government, they issue a reinterpretation to explain the constitution. In French, probably, it lies to Constitutional Court or Supreme Court to explain how the constitution means. But in Hong Kong, it lies in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. So this bunch of people, without legal training, they can decide what the constitution means in Hong Kong by political needs. So what happened is, after my oath, they re-explained the law and to add new requirements into the law, so that they said, oh, the law, the oath I took, which was legal, it was illegal now under the new restriction. And they applied it retrospectively. So they amended the requirement and then apply it to the actions happened before, which is completely violating the legal norm that we used to know, because new law cannot prosecute old actions. That's what we know about laws. So what had happened was Beijing unseated me after 9 months of my serving in the Legislative Council. And it was seen pervasively in the international legal community as a blatant abuse of law and legal persecution.
So it was just a twist, just a pretext to fire you from any responsibility?
It was an action by the Beijing government to twist the law in order to fire me. I got the mandate of people, I got 50,000 votes. But Beijing says that we don't care. We will throw all your votes to the rubbish bin. And because they don't want me in the council to be critical to them.
In your book, you write, authoritarians don't want to hear from a public that might contradict them, so civil society is often conveniently framed as an outside conspiracy by hostile foreigners to undermine the authority and power of the regime. What concrete forms have this use of conspiracy theory taken on Beijing's part?
Beijing has a huge machine for propaganda. They love to depict all the discontent of people towards the regime as initiated by foreign forces, because they can dismiss their legitimate demands and says that they are all part of a major campaign to destroy China. So what had happened in Hong Kong is we had our independent thinking. We protest by ourselves. Hong Kong people participate and gather together. And Beijing would say that, no, these people are initiated by CIA, initiated by foreign forces, so that to make our demands for democracy less credible. So this is the usual tactic that they use to dismiss the credibility and legitimacy of the protesters. And this is definitely the conspiracy theory and propaganda that they've been pushing forward.
And you have as well accusation of racist conspiracy against China. This using of this kind of accusation, is it something that you can observe regularly or not?
The stigmatization and propaganda from Beijing does not only limit to a movement, but it also extends to individuals. I was accused to be a CIA agent, a racist, etc. But this is not about racist. We're talking about a regime that also brutally persecutes its people. The narrative, the proposition that we're putting forward to hold Chinese Communist Party accountable, it does not target the people. We're actually trying to make a better life for the people because they are also suffering from this autocracy. We're not talking about the culture. The culture of the Chinese culture has nothing to do with the Chinese regime. The Chinese regime destroyed most of the Chinese culture in the Cultural Revolution in the 60s, 70s. And it's not about the country itself. It's about the regime. It's about the regime that has no mandate from people, that abuse so much of their power in order to retain in power, and has brutally murdered their people. So it's very clear that a lot of this stigmatization from the Chinese regime is to dismiss the credibility and the demands of us. But I don't think they are doing well. Many have already spotted these are lies, and they continue to support the Hong Kong movement.
When I'm listening to you, I realize how much, Xi Jinping propaganda plan, schedule looks like Putin wants, actually. What do you think about it?
Of course, we've seen similar narrative in the way, for example, they say that, oh, Taiwan is in the indispensable part of China, as they say in Russia, Ukraine never left Russia, and they've said that, oh, there are a lot of extremists that trying to overthrow their regime. And it's fair to say that they are best friends. Xi Jinping, even after Putin launched that war in Ukraine, he says that the collaboration in between Russia and China has no limits. And for now, they're still in a very good relationship. China's buying so much more from Russia because the West has boycotted, sanctioned, and Russia gets money from that to support the war. So they are forming a very close alliance. And dictators, they know that they have to support each other. But democracies are not reacting as much as we can. We have not been forming good alliance to curtail, to cope with these arising dictators. And we needed to do more for our democracy.
So a few years ago, because your life was in danger, you have to flee. You had to flee China, Hong Kong, and to set up in London. Do you think that your life is still in danger? Do you fear for your life there?
For now, I'm a political refugee. I got my asylum status in London last April. In this period of time, we've seen a lot of assassination to dissidents all around the world. The most famous case is Navalny's case. Of course, I would have same fear, but I tend to live my life as normal. I won't let the fear to consume me. I will continue to speak up, because if I don't speak up, they have achieved their aim already. which is to silence me. So yes, I try to be aware, be cautious, but I will definitely continue to do my advocacy work until the day I can go home and when Hong Kong is democratic and free again.
The dissidents of the 70s and 80s had a stainless face in democracy. Today, however, we have the impression that democracy is no longer desirable. Even here in Europe or in the United States, it is becoming the object of disaffection. So first question, is this something that you also feel? And the second one, what would you like to say to young French people who find that there is not so much difference between democracy and a dictatorial regime?
I think it is not because young people don't care about politics, don't care about the future of society. It's about, I think they feel like politics has failed them. Many people, when they don't vote, even though they want to change the society, they feel like a vote doesn't work. So what we needed to do is not revitalize young people. They are very cautious about climate change. They're very cautious about poverty and many other issues. But what we have to vitalize is our electoral system, is our politics. And you have many things to do it, make politicians younger sometimes, make more voices into it, to mobilize the base of young people, to listen to them. I think that it is still, that like democracy is an ongoing project. It is not something when you have an electoral system and it's done. And there are so many constant challenges in our democracy. For now, democracy becomes more polarized, more tribalized. People have their own separate world. They live in a parallel universe. And we needed to work on social media. We needed to work on places that we can build consensus. So I think we are constantly in a crisis mode, but at least we can talk about it. At least people can decide. At least people can see the possibility of change. And that's the beauty of democracy.
You came to England from Hong Kong to find a refugee. And on the other hand, someone like Edward Snowden went to seek refugee in Russia. And did not have a word to condemn the Ukraine invasion in February. What does this crossover inspire you?
Some may think that the world is bipolar. There's only China and Russia, and another is US. But we are living in a much diversified world. We support Hong Kong democracy doesn't mean that, oh, we align with the US, or we support the resistance movement in Ukraine. It doesn't mean that we are the chest of the US. We stick with our values. And it's obvious that what the war in Ukraine violates every piece of our values. And I think as an activist, I have to speak up. I have to support the people there. So I think that we should definitely continue to be vocal about these problems and have our own voice and become our own agency.
More than 30 years, you know, after the British left the island, left Hong Kong, what remain of the British influence there? When we see in the newspapers people from Hong Kong, we see the first name in English usually, you know?
Nathan, Joshua.
And, yeah, I think it's part of your identity now. Does it still remain?
For Hong Kong people, we are very used to become a global citizen. We read news not only about Hong Kong, about China. We read news about the world. We learn English from a very young age so that we can communicate with the world. It is already in our identity, in our community, that we want to outreach to the world, not just to talk to China. But that slowly is changing, that China wants our world to be smaller. China wants to erase the kind of very cosmopolitan nature of our community. And I think this is a really sad thing. It's not only about how we preserve our identity, but the advantage and the city has. It's slowly going away. So for me, it's really disheartened to see things develop.
And what future do you fancy, do you imagine for Hong Kong, for China as well in the future? How can all this can evolve in the best or the worst way, actually?
Of course, as an activist, I hope China, I hope Hong Kong, they can be more liberalized, they can be free, they can be democratic. But what we have seen is, in the short-term future, it could be very grim. Xi Jinping still holds on to power. He still believes in the totalitarianism.
It depends on him.
He is a big factor. He's the dictator. So he has a lot of leverage, a lot of power to make things changes or make things worse. So I don't think in short-term future we have many optimism about big changes. But I think there will be crisis in mainland China as the economy is not doing well, the dictatorial governance is not doing well. What we can see in Shanghai, the COVID handling was extremely bad. Maybe if there are crises, there could be changes. So I still believe in the possibility of change, but I have to also be very patient, continue to do my advocacy work, raise awareness to the persecution in everywhere in mainland China. And we try to create an environment that we can encourage the people of China and the people around the world to support a freer and more democratic system.
The Chinese officials, usually they say to, when they speak to the international community, they say, okay, we believe to democracy, we believe to the human rights, but we have another conception than you. What is their conception, actually?
China has held a press conference introducing the white paper that they called China is the democracy that works. And he says that US doesn't work, EU doesn't work, China is the only democracy that works. But in their definition, democracy does not involve universal suffrage. It does not involve your vote. It does not involve a division of power. It does not involve a change of leadership. They are trying to rewrite the concept that we have known for years into their own terms, so that they would say that, oh, we have already accomplished what you want us to do. It's a lie, it's a propaganda, it's the way that they try to foolish themselves. But somehow they wanted to do it. They wanted to do it with Russia and with other dictators. So we have to understand that it is not only about a threat to our economy, to our national security. They also wanted to undermine us from our ideological term and from the very thing that we believe. This is also a very dangerous alarm.
Last word about Hong Kong, China, democracy.
We want democracy, we deserve democracy. And the world understand that the fight for Hong Kong people is not only for Hong Kong people, but for the democracy of the world. We are a very clear example of how a free city can be eroded by a dictator in such a short period of time. We're talking about a year and a half, 2 years, the whole civil society gone with decades of a foundation. So it's really important for the world to recognize that we must stand together to support Hong Kong and also support democracy as well. If we are too complacent, too slow to act, maybe for the next 10 years, we were still in the democratic recession that we have had for more than a decade. And this is the least thing that we want.
Thank you very much, Nathan.
Thank you so much.